Welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels, or City of Demons, or Hollyweird, La La Land, or all these funny names, as my guest is laughing. And it's true. He's laughing because he knows it's true. Now, first, let me give a shout out first to where we are broadcasting from our home base. All those people listening on FM 107.7 FM in New Orleans, Louisiana from UPRN. I want to give you a big shout out, especially if you're driving in your cars or wherever you are. But remember, there are so many different forms you could hear this show, including iHeartMedia, Deprogrammed Radio Network in the UK, which has terrestrial stations London, Leeds, EU, and elsewhere, Hong Kong, Canada, and of course, YouTube. And I also want to say to all those folks for all the different chat rooms, the one that I do pay attention to during the show is the one in YouTube. Now, my guest today does not need very much. He really doesn't need any prequel leading up to who he is. He doesn't, he is the man. He's the godfather of ufology. 7 years ago in a week will be the first time I started working with Third Phase of the Moon. He was my second guest then, and he was my first guest when I started my own show, March 2013. And we've done several since then. With that being said, now let me bring him back. Stan the Man Friedman, welcome back, dear friend.
Delighted to be on. I love doing radio.
And you are fantastic at it, and you always, and you know what? I have to tell you this. I don't think I've updated you on this for a while. When I had you debate Robert Schaefer, the thumbs up for you and the thumbs down for him is such a big disparaging number. And the number of views for that 2 hour debate is astonishing. You destroyed him in a good, polite, professional, scientific way. You burst his bubble. Now, let's wind the clock back to 1958, 61 years ago. I could tell from most of these people in chat, I'm assuming most weren't even born then. Surely I was until 79. And even then, Mr. Friedman, Stan the Man, as I like to say, you already had a huge career as the ufologist. One of the main documentaries, maybe you could enlighten me on the title of it, which was produced in the 70s. It was the first time that I had seen Jesse Marcel. You were in it, Jesse Marcel Sr. And also, yes, it was a craft over Catalina Island. Do you recall that documentary?
It was a long time ago, but yeah, I've done so many documentaries. But Catalina Island was a good case, and I lived in California for 14 years, so I have a strong spot in my heart for. I lived in Southern California some of that time, Torrance and places like that, and so it was always good to do shows in California because there's so many people out there who have had sightings.
Yes.
And I've checked some audiences. My lecture audiences typically, when I just ask at the end of a lecture, how many people here believe they've seen a flying saucer? It's typically 10%. Of course, there's a little problem when I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. We don't hear about all the sightings, but I was recently aware, I was in California, I think, there were 500 sightings that month. So UFOs are a popular subject out there, as they should be. And, it's not only what people see, and occasionally they see on the ground, and occasionally they see maybe 6 times accompanied by, I'll call them beings, aliens, call them what you want. Sightings are far more common than most people realize. People are so surprised when I ask my audiences at the end of a lecture, and so many hands go up. How many reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. So I'm trying to lift the laughter curtain and get people to recognize it's okay. A lot of other people have seen them too. And so the world has changed. I gave my first lecture in, 1967. And, we've been to the moon and other little details like that. And when I was growing up, if somebody had told me, Stan, they're going to be going to the moon pretty quick, I'd have laughed my head off. But it happened, even though I was working on far-out stuff anyway, nuclear airplanes, fission rockets, fusion rockets, nuclear power plants for space. That's pretty far-out stuff. Not quite as far out as flying saucers, but almost. So it's good to see how the world has changed. I mean, I'm an old guy now. And, in 6 years I'll be 90, for goodness sakes. That's old. 84, that's peanuts, But the world's attitude has changed so much about alien life, if you will, partly because of our own success in space. There were many people who would have thought we'd never go into space. You got to be crazy, man, was the attitude of some of the people back when I started. And now people sort of take for granted the fact that man's traveling in space, and an awful lot of them think that there are others coming here. And so it makes for times changing, and I'm so glad of that we begin to look at ourselves a little differently. Less special if there's life running around all over the place or flying around all over the place out there. That means we're not so special. But it's exciting to watch in one lifespan like mine how times have changed, attitudes have changed. And it sounds strange to say, but I actually worked on nuclear fusion propulsion systems for deep space travel way back in 1962. And our conclusion, incidentally, in the study that we did at Aerojet General Nucleonics, was that if you got the dough, you can go. Ain't going to be cheap. And that's one of the things that people don't understand sometimes, is that advanced technology takes a lot of money. When I was working on nuclear airplanes, way back in 1968, we spent in our program that year, Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department of General Electric, $100 million that year, employed over 3,000 people.
And if you count with inflation, I couldn't even imagine what that figure is now.
Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to say is that advanced technology costs money, like it or not. It takes a lot of looking in a lot of directions to solve all the detailed problems. It's not 6 professors gathering around with 20 grad students. Oh, we can build a nuclear-powered rocket. No, you can't. So it's been interesting to see how things change. And, the word fusion, we didn't even know about fusion and fission early in the 30s. And both of them we found out about in 1938. But fusion is what produces almost all the energy in the universe. All the stars work by nuclear fusion. That's not burning gas. It's producing very hot gas. So if we primitive earthlings, and I say that because, look, we aren't that old as a society, but the planet is over 4 billion years old. So we started advanced technology within my lifetime, but there must have been others who started long before that. So, it would be nice to have a history book of this corner of the galaxy. For how long have people been traipsing about? And I'm sure each group, initially there were people who said, that's impossible. You can't fly into space. You can't fly to other planets. You can't go to other solar systems, et cetera, ad nauseum. There were people, the naysayers are always out there. But let's face it, we can go to the stars. If we want to spend the dough, we can go. Now, they may not want us out there. I mean, I can't imagine. Maybe we set a record by killing 50 million people in World War II. I mean,
27 million from Soviet Union at that time.
Well, the point is that we Earthlings don't have such a good track record. You know what I mean? Nobody would say, "Oh, they're nice guys." What's a few tens of millions of lives in a war? You know. So one of the things people say to me, well, why don't these aliens just come here and take over? Maybe not everybody thinks that's the right thing to do. That's hard to believe. I mean, we're only spending, $1 trillion this year on things military on planet Earth, but maybe some societies have gone past that point. And I'm looking forward, before I pass on, to finding out more about other societies elsewhere. Wouldn't that be exciting?
And I honestly think we're at the brink. And I told people we'll take questions later, but already there's an amazing comment that I definitely need to read to you, Mr. Friedman. This comes from Lars Saturn in a super chat. He says, "This brilliant guest has stood the test of time. 100%. This is amazing. And hands down, agreed." Now, let me get to the question. This is from Frankie Zomboy. What is his thoughts on extra-dimensional as opposed to extraterrestrial?
Well, because I worked on advanced space programs, fission nuclear rockets, I was involved in the study of fusion nuclear rockets and stuff. I don't think we need to go to ultra dimensions, if you will. If somebody knows how to do that, that would be a great way to solve the problem. You know, to get from there here without being the places in between, which would be kind of neat. But I don't think we need that. What people don't understand, I guess, is that it only takes a year at 1g acceleration to get to the speed of light. And one of the crazy things about Einstein's physics, which has turned out to be true, is you get close to the speed of light, time slows down for things moving that fast. And people look at me, what do you mean? Just what I said. You think it's going to take 10 years? It may only take a year to get where you want to go. So the world is weird. Relativity is strange. Mass increases as you get close to the speed of light. And, it's exciting to find the peculiarities of the world around us, not just the norm, but the oddball stuff. That's exciting, isn't it? I mean, maybe I'm the only one who's excited by that.
No, clearly. And this is why so many people are tuning in to hear you. And because we all find this exciting. Heck, I should be practicing law and either prosecuting people or defending or sitting in an office doing contracts or something. But no, instead, I'm trying to be as proactive as I can be in bringing this information to people who are sort of ridiculing it. But what I've noticed, Mr. Friedman, and I'm sure you've seen this definitely over the decades, is that the people that are laughing at us or ridiculing us has really sort of started to shrink. Yes, they still exist, but yes.
Yes, yeah, there's no question about that. I've only had 11 hecklers in over 600 lectures, and none in the last several years. So the notion that there's other life out there, that some of it can get here, is not widely ridiculed anymore. We've come to realize that things are different from the way we thought they were, and that's what's peculiar about relativity. It doesn't make any sense. The faster you go, the slower time goes. That sounds, what did he say? That's true. And we proved that with particles, and I don't know any people who've gone relativistic, but they will, because everything else, the vehicles will. So the times they are changing, and I'm glad to be alive still when some of those changes are taking place.
There's
My great-grandson might be around when Earthlings go to the stars.
And
That's exciting.
when at the same time there's a possibility when your great grandson may have a time where we may be living and seeing ETs walking on the streets, same as us. Who knows,
Yeah.
right? We got a few questions already for you.
All right.
The first one is from Lars Saturn, who gave the amazing comment. He goes, I think aliens are interdimensional. How do we calculate asteroids going to space and deep space?
How do we calculate? I don't understand. How do you calculate an asteroid? I mean, maybe you can hit it with a hammer, but I don't know how you calculate it. Relativity, if that's what you're really talking about, is how time changes as the speed changes, is very peculiar, but it's real, which would sound very strange to somebody 100 years ago, who would never think we'd get anywhere near the speed of light. But we will, and we're thinking about it now, in the sense of thinking about, hey, if we get going fast enough, say with a fusion propulsion system, and somebody would have said, what the heck is that 100 years ago? We didn't know that's how the sun produced its energy. We were woefully ignorant. And now the universe has opened up and revealed some of its secrets, which I find very exciting. And getting close to the speed of light is one of those secrets, I think. Not so secret if you've got, say, nuclear fusion. And people look at me, what do you mean nuclear fusion? Fission is what goes on in those nuclear rockets you worked on. Well, yeah, but fusion also goes on in stars all over the place. That's how almost all the energy on the Earth is produced, nuclear fusion. And we didn't even know that it existed before 1932. And we didn't produce it until after the war. So it's exciting to be alive at a time when our knowledge has changed so drastically within a lifespan. All the things that people said were impossible, now we say, hey, wait a minute. We didn't know how to do them. That's not the same as saying they were impossible.
Well, look what we did in under 70 years. You have the Wright brothers, the first unmanned or manned flight, and then 1969, we have Apollo 11 on the moon. That's like you said, a lifespan. Literally a lifespan.
Yeah, it is. Isn't it exciting to be alive when everything stopped when we went to the moon? People all over the world. I understand 500 million people were watching when it happened, if not more, when we were on the moon. I find it very exciting to be alive at a time when such extraordinary things happen. And one of those extraordinary things is interacting with the local neighborhood, meaning other planets, other stars, and so forth. One other thing that's changed, incidentally, when Frank Drake talked about SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, in about 1962, he was talking about there might be 8,000 other places in the galaxy where there's life. Now we know that there's about 1.6 planets per star. Now, our galaxy, which is one of billions, has a lot of stars, over 100 billion. That implies more than 100 billion planets. 100 billion. Not 8,000. That's one heck of a difference.
Huge.
So, and add into that the fact the age of the planet. In the 1650s, it was thought that the world was created in 4004 BC, 6,000 years
6,000 years, that's right.
Yeah, and now we're talking the Earth more than 4 billion years, and the universe, give or take a little, 13 billion years. And then we realized 13 billion, but we've only had a civilization for a few hundred years, a few thousand years, if you want to be generous. And you're talking billions. So anybody who thinks we're the most advanced beings around, I think, has another thought coming.
You know, back even in the 80s, a short time ago, 30 years ago, science books in elementary school, 84, 85, 86, all that time, we were the only planets. The 9 planets in this solar system were the only ones. And they said anyone who thought that the planets existed outside of our solar system, exoplanets, were nuts. Yet here we are with the Kepler telescope consistently finding
Boy.
them every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting to be alive when our knowledge changes so rapidly. And so excitingly, because what could be more exciting than saying maybe there's 100 billion planets in the galaxy. 100 billion. And, what people don't talk about when they talk about life out there, they forget that two of the principles of the distribution of life are colonization and migration. People who are here go there, and people from there go over there, and right on down the line. It's not all starting in one place. They set up colonies. They go traveling. And people say, well, why would you travel? Well, maybe you realize that, like, people don't normally think about it. What's special about Earth? One of the things that's special is that we're the densest planet in the solar system. I don't mean that people are dense. I mean, a cubic meter of Earth weighs more than a cubic meter of any of the other planets in the solar system. And you say, so what? Well, it means there are more heavy metals here. Things like uranium, osmium, rhenium, platinum. These are much denser than lead. So people may have been mining our goodies here for a long time. We don't know. But we have a special place. It's got more of these heavy, dense goodies than any of the other planets in the solar system. I find that exciting. I bet you don't learn that in school as to what's special about Earth. What's the densest planet around? What? That's who cares? Who worries about it and so forth? Well, it's exciting. And if some people think, they're all just about the same, lead has a specific gravity, a density of about 11 point something grams per cubic centimeter. And heavy as lead, you hear people say that. Well, uranium, it's 19.
Ooh.
Osmium is 22. Twice as dense as lead. And you thought lead was heavy. It ain't the top one by any stretch of the imagination. So we sometimes forget about how peculiar the place is where we live.
Now, let me get to some of these questions because you got a lot of fans, Mr. Friedman. Like
Good.
Lars said earlier, you've definitely stood the test of time. Let me go back and find Lars's question. I'm going to go in reverse order. Let's see here. Well, let me read Katarina's questions and see it first. Katarina Luna Di Camilla. Stan is a nuclear scientist. How long does he think we truly able go for interstellar travel? I'm reading it word for word, by the way.
It sounds like that means how soon before we go.
Yes, I'm assuming.
And look, I worked on a study of fusion propulsion back in 1962. If you got the dough, we know you can go. It sounds pretty trite, but nuclear fusion would do the job. Fusion is what goes on in H-bombs. And look at the increase in the amount of energy we have control over. A big bomb during World War II was a 10-ton blockbuster. It released the energy of 10 tons of dynamite, TNT if you want. Okay, the first atomic bomb, a fission device, 1945, released the energy of 15,000 tons of dynamite. The first H-bomb released the energy of 10 million tons
Jeez.
of dynamite. One stinking weapon. And the biggest one, the Russians sent one off that was a little over 50 million tons of dynamite energy release capability. So we go from 10 tons to 50 million tons within our lifespan. That's incredible.
Enough to decimate us, I really would think. And, I would... Thankfully, there hasn't been nuclear proliferation. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be here. And I hope these treaties and the people who created these weapons of mass destruction truly know that that's what's going to happen. Now, back to Lars Saturn's question. To send a rocket, satellite, etc., there are asteroids. We have a belt. How do we make it through the hazards?
Well, there are asteroids, but they're not close to each other. It's not like you can see one from another. They're thousands of miles apart, for the most part. So we got good radar. We got good viewing, in other words. You got to be careful where you step. There's mud occasionally, but they're not. The asteroids aren't close. You don't say, "Oh my goodness, the chances are 10 to 1 that I'm going to run into an asteroid." No, they're not. They're few and far between, but there's a lot of space for them. So if you want to go looking, it'll take you a while to find one. So I don't worry about that. You could be driving down the highway and a meteor could hit you, but it's not very likely. Possible, but not likely.
Now, Paper Crane Wishes, she asks, has he ever met an ET, meaning, of course, you?
I know not only have never met an ET as far as I know, but I've never seen a flying saucer. Hey, I've never seen a neutron either, and they're all over the place. I spent 14 years of my life worrying about neutrons and gamma rays and stuff. Never saw one of them either. So, they don't need to be common. People don't need to see them every day for there to be a lot of them. I've checked a lot of audiences. I've given over 700 lectures total in 50 states, in 20 other countries, 10 provinces of Canada, etc. And when I check my audiences, typically 10% of the people have seen them. And then I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. So sightings are common. Reporting of sightings is much less common. And 5 or 10% of the sightings involve reports of beings associated with craft on the ground. So it doesn't happen often, but often enough so to say it's not that rare. So we got to be ready. There are a lot of strange things that happen. Murders happen, even though most people aren't likely to be murdered.
That's right. Or to commit it.
No, thankfully.
Now, more keep piling up. People definitely want to interact with you, so I'm not going to stop them.
Okay.
I'm going to say this to everybody listening. Your questions definitely supersede mine. So whenever I see one of your questions, mine go on hold. Okay. Lou Sheehan is asking to ask you about the New York Times article. I don't know which article?
Which one?
That's the question I was going to say. Do you know? Maybe he knows. He says, ask about the New York Times article. Where is it leading? Lou, if you could please tell us more about that and reference the article, that would be great. Oh, he says he's driving. Okay, we'll get back to that, and maybe someone else will find it here. All right, now we also have, here we go. This comes from Guy Merritt. I've been very close to 2 UFOs, and I would think that advanced races can bend time and space. Wouldn't that be a more likely possibility for these guys getting here?
Well, I don't know if it's more likely unless you have the data. How can you say whether it's less or more likely? But, look, it takes less than a year at 1g acceleration, the acceleration of gravity here on the surface of Earth, to get close to the speed of light. Less than a year. at 1G, and we can stand 5Gs for a long period of time. And you can stand 30 for a short period of time, very short, and you better be holding on to something. But what I'm saying is that a nuclear fusion is what produces most of the energy in the universe. The stars, the sun, all the stars produce their energy by nuclear fusion. That's H-bombs if you want to look at it that way, because they use nuclear fusion too. But we'll be using fusion as a useful servant to mankind. That's an awkward way to put it, but you know what I mean. Within not very long from now. Yes, fusion is what goes on H-bombs, but I worked on a study of fusion for deep space propulsion back at Aerojet General Nucleonics in 1962. Takes money, and you got to have an objective. So why do you want to go that fast? Where are you going? Until somebody's willing to pay for the expedition, you ain't going to build one, I'll tell you that. They're not cheap.
Well said. Now, this question's a little touchy because we've talked about this several times, and I've even seen you debate Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell at the UFO Congress in 2015. This comes from Frankie Zomboy. What is his position on Bob Lazar nowadays, and why?
Okay. Robert Scott Lazar, a bright young man. Well, young. He's in his 40s. I first heard about him 25 or so years ago, or 20, a long time ago. And people were asking me about him because he claimed to be a nuclear physicist, and they knew I was claiming to be a nuclear physicist, and I've got a couple diplomas to prove it. But anyway, so I did a lot of checking because I didn't want to express an opinion without having some data. So I checked the places where he supposedly went to school. Didn't go to school at MIT or Caltech. I talked to his high school. I don't know of anybody else who did, but it turned out he finished in the bottom third of his high school class, which makes it very unlikely that he went to any college. I did a lot of other checking, and I had to say that I could find no evidence to substantiate the notion that he was a scientist of any kind, no less than a nuclear physicist, or that he'd ever done any work, scientific work. No published papers, no membership in professional societies like the American Physical Society, the American Nuclear Society, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. So I did my darnest to check on his background, and he doesn't check out. And so, most people, if you say you've gone to college, you can produce a diploma or a listing in a yearbook. And I've had a lot of people look, and nobody can find any evidence that Bob, who seems to be a nice guy and a bright guy, ever went to college, ever got a diploma in anything, was ever a scientist. As a real person, he did work at Los Alamos for less than a year. They have loads of people who work there who aren't scientists. I had surprised somebody who said, "What do you mean? If you're not, don't you have to be a scientist to work at Los Alamos?" No. They're technicians. There are all kinds of people who do things there that aren't scientists. So my position on Lazar is he tells a good story. He's apparently a bright guy. I've heard him speak, and he's no fool. But he isn't telling the truth about his professional background because he doesn't have one. And there's been plenty of opportunity for anybody to come forward with a copy of a diploma, a listing in a yearbook, a membership in a society, a professional society. So if anybody's got any data, I'd sure like to see it.
I honestly, the newest documentary, I don't think there was anything in it that I haven't heard already, other than there being an FBI raid and a question about had he possessed any of this,
Element 115?
Yeah. But in the movie, what they ended up doing is sort of fast forwarding his answer and saying that they were going to encrypt the audio and the video of that answer and store it in a safe place, and then comes an FBI raid. That's the only new thing I got from it, but again, it doesn't give you the answer. Okay,
no.
Moving on. Pyramid 7. Tell us about green/free energy on a do-it-yourself scale, please.
Give me that again. What was it? There was one word that I missed.
Tell us about green/free energy on a DIY scale, please. DIY, do it yourself.
Do it yourself. Well, I don't know of any such thing. I know I've heard of talk, but I haven't seen any evidence. You know, there have been an awful lot of people looking for better means of producing energy. And we've gone through fission. We use fusion for H-bombs. We haven't built a successful, very productive fusion device to produce energy cheaply or electricity cheaply or anything like that. So I'm still waiting. I haven't seen any evidence that we have that. It sounds good. That doesn't make it true.
Agreed, agreed. And you know what? You have a lot of patents that were seized, and we don't know what happened with them. What is actually happening behind closed doors? I remember years ago seeing this video of a Japanese man in Japan who had created a motor where basically he converted his car to run on water. But not long after that was the car gone, was the video gone, and every trace of it. So who's to say where it is at this point? Okay.
Not me.
Yeah, right? Okay. Lisa Kastner asks, any comments about the books M031, UFO Highway, or Colonel Corso's book about reverse engineering?
Well, I've met Colonel Corso. Seems to be a nice enough guy. He was really a lieutenant colonel while he was in the service, and when he got out, he got his promotion. And I can't find anything to substantiate his many claims about having produced. You know, there's a whole long list of what he supposedly produced in terms of energy production. I haven't found any evidence to substantiate any of it. It's easy to make claims, but to provide evidence is something else. And I haven't seen any. I'm not saying he was a bad person. I just don't think he was telling the truth about what he did when he was in the military.
And also, I thought it was a little extra thing that in the book he also talks about having being in Roswell to some degree, either in a transport truck where he actually looked at a body. I thought that was, because there's not that many people that would have been around Roswell Army Airfield, no matter where you were following World War II. There's several military installations across the world, across the whole continent, not just the United States. So, but I just wanted to throw that in there. Lisa Kastner wanted to also correct the MO31. She means MO41, Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
Well, Cape Girardeau, I've talked to people who did some investigating there. I'm satisfied there really was a case there, a good case. Look, UFO sightings, landings, reports of beings, etc., are really quite common. But most people, the fear of ridicule keeps people from talking about them. But, yeah, good case in Cape Girardeau. There were some good investigation done. Gee, it was years ago when I first heard about that.
Adam Ambrose, what is the most compelling evidence for alien abduction?
Well, you got to look at specific cases, and I've spent a lot of time. I'm co-author of a book called Captured. Kathleen Marden is Betty Hill's niece, and Betty was involved with her husband Barney, and I did meet them. It was a long time ago, but because I'm an old guy. And I'm very satisfied that case happened. And in working with Kathleen, we've come across a number of abduction cases. So I'm not saying every claim of an abduction is true. You're a good baseball player if you get a hit a third of the time. 1 out of 3. It doesn't need to be 95%. So abductions are happening. Now, people say, well, why would they abduct people? They're doing a census. They're doing a survey. They're looking for somebody with a peculiar gene, for example. Just to give you an example, hemophilia is a genetic disease. That is, the tendency not for your blood not to clot is inherited. And we still find that there's only 1 in 10,000 who are hemophiliacs. I mean, there's a hemophilia society. There are products produced to treat hemophiliacs, et cetera, et cetera. But 1 in 10,000 is pretty small potatoes. So you don't need to have lots and lots of anything to say that it's real, like abductions. There are plenty of abductions that have gone on. And, I don't know whether the aliens are graduate students doing their thesis work, looking for a certain kind of being, or who knows, a statistical analysis, looking for relatives of long-lost aliens. We have no idea. The whole question of why people, no less aliens, do anything can get very complicated. And there may be reasons we haven't even dreamed about that they're doing these things. Who knows?
I remember when I saw one of the several documentaries where you were saying, when people asked you why do you think you're coming here, and you said exactly that. There's multitude of reasons. One could be, like you said, they're grad students coming here to do their thesis. That may very well be the case. They just may very well be explorers watching what we call this ant farm known as civilization on Earth. Moving on to the next question. Stephen Padilla. Where does Stanton see the future of ufology in the coming years?
Well, I think in a couple of directions that come to mind. One of them is having the media make a major effort to get people who've had significant events, maybe studied an alien corpse or things like that, direct contact, come forward. And, getting the government to say, well, we're going to hold back on security on these things. We won't prosecute anybody for talking about this stuff. I'm not expecting that to happen, you understand. But I'm saying, I think if a real effort was made to collect more and better cases of not only abductions, but physical trace cases, and effects on vehicles and stuff like that, I think we could get an awful lot of data. Most people, when I've checked my audiences, I'll ask, for example, how many have seen a UFO, typically 10%, and then I ask how many reported what they saw. 90% of the hands go down. So we're not getting all the data. So I'm an optimist that if we make it more popular, if you will, more okay to say that you've seen one, been abducted by one, et cetera, that we would get a lot more reports. We're missing most of the good stuff. And the more respectable the individual, the less likely he is to report his sighting or his observation of an alien or anything like that.
UFO Disclosure TV, please ask if he believes the government will remove info from database to cover up the truth. This is regarding the Bob Lazar school info.
Well, I've tried my darnest to get anything solid about Lazar. I talked to his high school. And I've talked to a number of people. And impossible to get anything that substantiates it. Now, you'd think if he's got, remember, he was claiming that he had a master's degree in physics. Anybody with a degree should be able to show a diploma, should be listed in a directory from a college. And I've checked with a couple of people at colleges. Is there any way to wipe out somebody's records? Well, you don't get access to somebody's grade point average, for example, without having had permission from the person. But on the other hand, they have all said you just can't wipe out the existence on a campus of somebody. Uh, it's different from saying you can prove he was there. You can't prove maybe that he was studying UFOs or all kinds of other possible things. So I think I'm not expecting any big change unless somebody in the government makes a major effort or some media person takes the subject more seriously than it's generally taken by the media. I mean, I recently had a list compiled of more than 36 PhD theses done about UFOs. And some people have looked at me, what? I said, yeah, they're out there if you go looking. And I found a listing, and it was intriguing. All kinds of things, but most people have never heard of them. Certainly most reporters have never heard that there's a wealth of information out there. So I'm still an optimist. It's getting better. While I'm around, maybe somebody will come forward live.
That's true. That's true. Following up on from UFO Disclosure TV is asking what school you went to learn about nuclear science.
Well, okay. My educational background is very straightforward. I went to Linden High School in Linden, New Jersey. I was valedictorian of the class of 1951. We had 245 students in the class, and I ranked number 1. Wow. And, that and $2 to get you a cup of coffee most places. I spent 2 years at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Then I got accepted at the University of Chicago, and I got bachelor's and master's degrees in physics from the University of Chicago. And someplace around here, I was looking to see if I could see it on the wall from here, and I can't, but I have diplomas from there, and you can find me, and if you check with the university, I know a couple of people have told me they checked, and indeed I had gone there. So University of Chicago. Now, I've spoken at over 500 colleges and more than 100 professional groups, but I didn't go on for a PhD because I worked my way through college, and I was worried I wanted to take a year off and save money so I wouldn't have to work while I was going to school. But the draft was staring me in the face. I couldn't take the year off. You'd be drafted right away. So I got my master's, went to work in industry. I worked for little companies, General Electric, General Motors, Westinghouse, General Nucleonics, McDonnell Douglas. And no, I don't have a PhD, and I never, ever call myself doctor, although some people try to give me a free degree, and I refuse.
Okay, Eagle 49624, Stanton, do you believe that there are other or perhaps multiple dimensions and or parallel universes?
Well, that's one of those themes that occurs in a lot of science fiction stories, but I have no evidence to establish that it's true. I can't prove that it isn't true. Because, most new things you couldn't have proved weren't true when you went back when things first started. But so I will allow room for it, but I don't know how to do it. Sorry.
No worries. Now, Lisa Kastner wrote a couple questions, so I'm going to try to merge them together. The first is, what about Richard Dolan's work, some 200 craft picked up by U.S. military? Is he quite a historian?
Well, I haven't seen proof of 200 craft. If you mean by picked up, not on radar, but rather
crash and retrieval is what I heard.
Yeah, I have no reason to say that the number is that large, that there have been that many crashes. I'm not saying I can prove that there hasn't been. You don't prove negatives very often, but so I don't need 200. How many does it take to prove that it's real? When people were looking for cures for diseases, sometimes you try 500 things and 2 of them work. It's the ones that work that matter. The ones that don't, forget about them. Go on to something else. So that not all the stories are true doesn't mean none are. I'm so glad that some are.
Now we have a super chat question here, and let me give out. Lou. I'm gonna get you the call-in number because it is the station number. It's the 504 number, folks. And in the meantime, let me ask the super chat question from UFO Disclosure TV. Stanton T. Friedman, if you were to try and say you saw a UFO at a military base, I bet your school info will be gone as well? Question mark.
Well, I don't think so. Look, gave my first lecture in 1967, so I've been talking a long time, and I don't think that would change things. In other words, if I suddenly claim to have seen a UFO or handled one or been close to one, it would shock a lot of people because I never have. And what's the point? Look, one of the rules of scientific research is telling the truth. Very straightforward, very simple. You can't make up stories. You want to write fiction? Go ahead. But, and I read a lot of fiction. It's kind of fun. And I have since I was a youngster. But I can't make up stories. I can't. I'm sorry. I've never written a published piece of fiction. A lot of nonfiction.
You have several books. How many do you have at this point?
I think my name's on 6 books. Captured with Kathleen Marden, who's Betty Hill's niece. Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. That's the most recent one, less than 3 years old, I think. Also with Kathleen Marden. The Roswell Incident. Those are 3 of the big. Oh, Flying Saucers in Science is a book that I read. Look me up, then today with the internet, Stanton Friedman books, you'll find the 6. And almost all of them, I think, are still available. And I autograph, if you order them from me, which you can, go to the internet, and I autograph all the books I send out. No extra charge for the autograph.
Hey, and that's an honor. You know what? I have most of your books, and I got them directly from you from the events that I've seen you speak. And I was not only honored to get books that you had signed. I have several pictures at you from multiple places, even from Travis Walton's event back in 2015 when he did the 40-year anniversary, or yeah, 40-year anniversary. You were there.
Well, Travis, I'm a big believer, is the wrong way to put it, but anyway, I'm certainly convinced that Travis is telling the truth. I've talked to other witnesses who were there at the same events. Great guy, and I would stand behind him anytime. We've appeared on the same programs, television programs, for example, and he was very pleased about that because he knows that some people won't appear with So, good guy. One of the better cases around.
Now, Pyramid 7, what is his opinion on the latest Ivy League science professor stating that we are being bred with extraterrestrials?
Well, to me, that's an interesting fiction plot. I can't prove that it hasn't happened, and I don't see any reason why it can't have happened. I just don't know. What can I say? I have no evidence of that. You could do it with DNA, maybe, but I don't know if anybody's got a sample of DNA that they're willing to share to say it's got to be like this. Who knows? A lot of weird people out there.
True, that's true. And like I said, Holly Weird, especially in my backyard. And you were, like you said, you lived here, and we missed paths because as I was born in 79, you were already gone out of here, weren't you?
I have to think about that. No, I think I still spent some time in California.
Oh, wow. We crossed paths when I was literally a tot. All right. This comes from Stephen Padilla. Are UFO researchers doing all they could for ufology?
Well, probably not. What people forget is it costs money to do research. to spend time checking out cases, to do lab analysis of samples, and all kinds of things. Money is what makes research go around. When I was working on nuclear airplanes, for example, way back in 1968, we spent $100 million in 1 year on that research. So it doesn't come cheap. So, it's nice to say, wouldn't it be nice if we could build this, that, or the other thing? It costs a lot of dough. It's very simple. When I was working on nuclear rockets, we tested them successfully at Westinghouse Astronuclear Lab. We tested one. Los Alamos tested one that was less than 8 feet in diameter that operated at a power level of 4,000 megawatts. That's twice the power of Hoover Dam, less than 8 feet in diameter, nuclear rocket engine. That program was canceled, of course, but that's the history of advanced development programs.
And I've seen some of the drawings that your team produced that you've shown in your lectures that were concepts of what these nuclear-powered rockets would look like if they were to be produced.
We did build them, and we did test them. The Phoebus 2B, for example, Los Alamos built that one. I worked on the NRX A6 at Westinghouse. And Aerojet built one at 1,000 megawatts. Ours was 1,100 megawatts. So nuclear rockets are not, these were ground tested now. They weren't tested, off the Earth. But they're real. It's not just a concept. And the exhaust temperatures on the Phoebus 2B, the Los Alamos system, for example, 4,000 megawatts, twice the power of Hoover Dam. The exhaust temperature is over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. These were real. These were built back, I hate to say it, in the late 60s. Makes me feel ancient, but it's true. So it's not a new idea, a new concept. And nobody's using them, as far as we know. But cost dough, you can go.
Well said. Well said. And you know what? If you pay $20 million to the Russians, you can take a little trip to the ISS, at least, go into the orbit. Okay. Adam Ambrose, are presidents of the United States briefed about UFOs breaching U.S. airspace and ETs?
That's a good question. I would expect that after a certain period of time they are, but I can't guarantee it. Look, I worked on classified programs for 14 years. All kinds of things are kept secret. And there's a good reason for it. You don't want somebody else to learn from the technology. Why don't we put it all out there? Because we don't want, say, the Russians to learn how to build a better system than we can build. And the big advanced propulsion systems aren't being used for anything. What are you going to do with it? We haven't decided to mount a trip to the next star system over. And interstellar travel is where you want to go. But it costs dough. And if you had enough dough, maybe you could go. Sorry.
That's true. That's true. Hey, and it rhymed too. Well said. Sol Brava, please forgive me if I mispronounce it. Sol Brava 19. What are your views on the SSP and our presence in the solar system? SSP meaning Secret Space Program.
Well, look, I'm absolutely convinced that there are some things in our space program, the Russian space program, other space programs, that haven't been declassified. But I do not have any reason to say, that doesn't mean there isn't, but I have no reason to say that there is a secret space program that has produced propulsion systems that have taken us, so say, to the stars or to Mars. I have seen no evidence. That's not the same as saying it can't be. But I know that it would be a big, expensive program. It costs a lot of dough to go. And why would you do it? We got other priorities here on this planet. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you're going to spend a huge amount of money to do it. Somebody's got to put up the dough.
It's true.
And if they don't, you won't go.
Especially since we retired the shuttles. I mean, clearly it's almost as if by taking the ability for NASA to have their own systems to get to the ISS or anywhere, they had to rely on private companies like SpaceX, which was just
Yes.
awarded the contract for the next trip up to the ISS. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Lou Sheehan, for the record, was there a Blue Book 13? If so, why wasn't it released? What were its contents? I think there were volumes 1 through 12 and 14.
Well, that's right. I have, I've often wished, where the heck is number 13? And I did work on programs where there were classified reports and there were ones that weren't classified. I have seen no evidence that there was a Blue Book report 13. There certainly were reports 1 through 12, and 14 is the big one. And I've sold a lot of copies of Project Blue Book Special Report 14, biggest study ever done that we know about for the United States Air Force. They looked at 3,201 sightings. They did quality evaluation of all the cases. The better the quality, the more likely to be unidentifiable, which is just the reverse of what would be the case if these things weren't real. 21.5% of the 3,201 sightings couldn't be identified. But the press release said, believe it or not, in the mid-50s, even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available. That's nonsense. The unknowns were 21.5%.
Almost a quarter.
Boy, almost a quarter. And to cut that down to 3% by executive fiat, that's what we're going to tell them, even though it isn't true, it's nonsense. So, there are many things. Is a quarter of the material produced in a gold mine, dug out of the ground, real gold? No, of course not. And if you're looking for cures for certain diseases, 10%, 5% of the chemicals you try, usually it's under 2%. So you don't need big numbers, in other words. You need quality, if you will. One good one makes up for 100 bad ones.
Now, Lisa Kastner, this is piggybacking off the secret space program. Any comments regarding the secret space program, Solar Warden, and the TR-3B's craft?
Well, there were pictures in, Mechanics Illustrated of the TR-3B back, 1980, something like that, 40 years ago. So I don't have really any other comments than that. I worked under security for 14 years. I am absolutely convinced that things can be kept secret. That doesn't mean everything is, or that there aren't leaks and so forth and so on. But let's not go overboard and say, well, if it can be, it is, and therefore all the stuff we're dreaming about is real and secret because governments can keep secrets. I think that's nonsense. You need evidence. And again, money is part of the problem. I worked on big programs. They cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you got to get the money somewhere. And it ain't from average Joe Blow, maybe from the tax money, but it takes an awful lot of it.
Now, okay, we have another super chat. I'm going to take this one first. UFO Disclosure TV. My UFO experience, dirty metal boomerang shape, 40-foot long, 8/10 feet tall, no noise. No noise above the tree line, amazing, so I know it's real or our government got some crazy tech. What's your opinion about that?
Well, I think the government does have some crazy tech that they haven't revealed. But remember, because you can doesn't mean you will. It may be that the cost is so high it's not worth it. Or what are you going to do with the darn thing? You try and, hey, we could build a super special rocket to destroy Moscow. What, is that what you want to do? In other words, there are some other choices that have to be made about what you do and how much you're willing to spend and what's the purpose of what you're doing. So that maybe you can isn't a reason enough to say that it has been done.
Carl Egan Wilkstrom, do you know Nordic aliens have triangle UFOs? And I'm assuming it's coming from another country because of the spelling of Wilkstrom.
Not that I know about. Maybe he can tell us something about it.
Now that's a challenge to you there, Carl. Okay. Frankie Zomboy, is there a point in space when the human body would cease to function without gravity?
Well, we know that man can handle a no gravity situation. We've had, when guys are in orbit, they're weightless for practical purposes. So it's not a question of a point in space. What's the point of it? You need humans weigh something, and if they weigh something, they have a gravitational effect on other systems as well. So I don't see the point of the question. In other words, I don't think we have any reason to say that people don't get close to weightless when they're going at high speed and under special conditions, free fall, that sort of thing. But I'm glad to have some weight. Not too much.
Okay. This actually comes from a guest that was just on, Elena Servideo Schwinn. Thank you, Elena, for listening in. Things can be kept very shrouded for long periods of time. Smoke and mirrors to deflect attention. What do you say about that?
Well, I think it's true. And, I had a security clearance, a Q clearance, for 14 years. And there were times when I wondered, why are we keeping this secret? But I think secrets can be kept. Some secrets should be kept because you don't want potentially very dangerous, threatening technology to be said about so that any two-bit dictator can get a hold of it and therefore destroy the heck out of the other parts of the world. Security is important, but it's to protect you, not just to say, I know something you don't know. So I'm not a believer in what's the point, in other words. If you got a secret system, if the other guy doesn't know about it, you're not threatening him with it, that's for sure.
The MUFON International Director, I'm assuming it's still the same person. Enlighten us if you could.
Jan Harzen.
That's right.
The international
he
director.
was
Yes.
in attendance at UCLA, the alumni, when they were at the alumni of the engineering when Ben Rich gave his famous speech. And this follows up with this question now, which is, Ben Rich from Skunkworks says, we have the technology to take E.T. home, ?
Yes. Yeah, I know that he said that. And the question, it may be a splitting hair, because you know how to do it doesn't mean you're willing to spend the money to build a fleet of things that will do that. Money and effort and all those things are important. And what are you going to do with it? What's the point of building really advanced systems that can do things that nobody is doing or needs to do? Just to say you can? I don't think that's a good enough reason. So I think that secrecy has a role to play because you don't want the other guy to get your technology and threaten you with it. That's a reason for keeping secrets. But is it a good enough reason to spend a huge amount of money to develop something that is horribly expensive? What have you gained? In other words, overkill. One bullet will kill a person. Sending 20 bullets into him, it doesn't buy you a lot. and costs you more for bullets. So the fact that something can be done doesn't mean you're going to do it. What's the point? What are your objectives in achieving that end? This is a question you have to ask.
Well said. Now, Lou Sheehan, when he was asking about Project Blue Book, he says, you didn't finish. What do you think was in volume 13?
Oh,
He says I'll read it word for word. I know he has heard about it. Has he heard anything interesting about the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program?
not terribly exciting, no. And I'm not saying that there wasn't a report 13. And I was involved in some projects where I wrote two final reports. One was highly classified, and one wasn't, and that one wasn't mentioned in the unclassified one. So it's discretion. What's the point of keeping it secret, or what's the point in telling people and not telling people? There are all kinds of questions about these things. But I think there have been many projects where they get to a certain point and you say, fish or cut bait. Well, look how much money it's going to cost. Is that how we want to spend our money? And do we achieve more national security that way? And these are valid questions that don't often get developed or discussed in public. So I don't know, but certainly you don't want your technology to fall in the hands of people who will use it entirely for bad things. Why would you want that?
Well said. That's true. And you know what? I'm glad you mentioned about people questioning, because after World War II, I don't think there was enough questioning going on with what our government was doing or why certain things were done the way they were. I think it's only now, because people are starting to finally be questioning our governments, private corporations, who I myself personally believe that if the military wants to avoid having to deal with the Freedom of Information Act, well, why not just put all the recovered technology into private corporations? Then you have no oversight whatsoever. That's just my little opinion I wanted to throw out there.
I want oversight.
Yeah, right. We all should. Preston Dennett said this very well. We all have the right to know not only that we're not alone, but we should be able to visit the Roswell wreckage in a museum. I really hope, like you said, your grandson, at some point this does happen.
Well, I'll be speaking in Roswell in July at the annual. It'll be the 50th annual, I think, Roswell gathering, if you will. I'll be there. I'm not expecting there to be any open the doors and let them all in, see the latest and best and so forth. I'm not expecting that to happen.
Lisa Kastner, Project Mockingbird / CIA to keep things censored? ?
Say that. What's the question? Should they keep things censored?
No, it's just a statement with the question mark. Basically, I'm reading word for word. Project Mockingbird / CIA to keep things censored?
Well, look, a lot of stuff is kept censored. And you can see some reasons for censorship are to make sure your enemies don't get new technology that will change the balance of power. This is a lot of nasty people on this planet. $1 trillion a year military budget is not small potatoes where I come from, anyway. And we grow a lot of potatoes here in New Brunswick, Canada, incidentally. Good potatoes, too.
Well said. Now, Frankie Zomboy has, what is his overall thoughts on the whole alien picture in a nutshell?
Well, I'm convinced that the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. I'm also convinced that it's pretty obvious if you had that technology to visit us from other star systems, that it would be useful in warfare. Therefore, you don't want to distribute it around. You don't want to change the balance of power on the planet. So, look, the fact you can do something doesn't mean you should do it, especially if it costs resources that you can't afford. Like go into debt, I know, develop new technology, that's what we always do. So who cares what it costs? Well, we do care what it costs. The taxpayer has enough of a burden without adding to it.
True. Too much of a burden in many cases.
Yes.
And you know what? I think if certain parties win, they want as much as 90% of our taxes. 10% take home. I can't even fathom how bad that would be to our economy and to each and every person's belongings. I mean, who can afford to buy a home, let alone to live at that point? We'll see what happens at that point. Okay, moving along. Let me find the next question here. This comes from helidiumlabs.com. Yellow Book. Did applied quantum mechanics come from space?
Not that I know of. That doesn't mean it didn't, but, advanced research and development costs money. And you have to be able to justify the expenditure of that money because many programs don't wind up in reaching their goal. Something may sound like a good idea, but you find you can't do it without spending an enormous amount of money that you don't have. So there are many programs that start, fewer that finish, and none of us have magic judgment that we can always tell which ones are worth pursuing now as opposed to a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now. You have to wait and see.
Now, Sol Brava, BROVAHH 19. What is your opinion on others having a presence on Earth? Others being off-world civilizations like underwater bases, etc.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if there aren't intelligent beings who know how to live underwater and so forth, but I don't see the point of it because most of the exciting things you got to be above the water to see. So I don't think you can see keeping military things there. I think one of the reasons we've not had a war has been that nuclear-powered submarines are always capable of retaliating. And if something happens, you're going to drop a bomb on me, I'll drop one on you. And you won't be able to destroy me because you don't know where my submarines are. So it's a balance, in other words. I'll get you if you try to get me. And that may sound like, it doesn't sound like fun. I didn't say it was fun. But I think it has kept the peace, so to speak, because we know the other guy can retaliate if I attack him first. And that's a big thing to know. And I say the submarines because nuclear-powered submarines obviously can stay underwater for months.
Yeah.
And you don't know where they are. They don't send out postcards.
That's right.
This is where I'm going to be next week.
As a matter of fact, don't those submarines actually have a lifespan from the nuclear reactor of up to 20 years, even sometimes longer?
Well, yeah, you probably have to refuel them in there too. But we have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers that can operate for 18 years without refueling.
Wow.
Which is very impressive to me. And they use burnable poisons. That is, normally, as you use up your fissionable material, pretty soon you don't have enough to sustain a nuclear chain reaction. But if you build in materials that absorb neutrons along the way, you don't need a refuel. And like I say, 18 years without refueling is very impressive to me, anyway.
And I would think to anybody, just like we said earlier in the conversation, just in the last 120 years, or even from the time the Wright brothers had their first test in Ohio to 1969 with Apollo 11, that lifespan alone saw so much change. I would think anybody, if they had a time machine and was able to have the ability to travel forward from into the future and had this ability say 150 years ago or even 100 years ago, and they traveled to today and they saw these nuclear powered submarines, nuclear powered aircraft carriers, I truly think they would be so blown away they'd be wondering, how could this be? And
Yes.
honestly, I think even if you went back 150 years ago, gave them a nuclear powered sub or an aircraft carrier, unlimited amount of money and resources, said, build us 10 more. I don't think it's ever
I
even
doubt it.
possible. Exactly.
I doubt it. Yes, and that's the thing, that there are realistic expectations one has to have. Throwing money at something doesn't mean you're going to get where you want to go. Uh, Sometimes it does, but not always. And you have to people in government have to make decisions about how you spend money, because you got to get it somewhere. You got to pay the people who are doing the work, and build the buildings, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, so I'm not a pessimist. I think we will be developing new means of killing. Man seems to have an insatiable appetite for figuring out ways to kill more. But I think there comes a point where you say, hey, that's not a good way to spend our dough. Let's find another way to go. Don't spend our dough that way.
Now, until someone else, of course, there's a lot of great comments about you. Even the most recent one from Rockstar 8970 Abel says, great interview, and there's a lot of that. While I give people time, we have 23 minutes, give or take, left. For those of you whose questions I may have missed, if you want to copy and paste them to the bottom, and if you could please put them in caps so I can separate the questions from the comments, I'd be more than happy to ask them. Because remember, folks, this show is for you. Stan the Man Friedman is on today for you folks. Okay, so in that time, Lisa Kastner came up. Here we go. Any comments regarding the, I'm assuming, military industrial complex and the New World Order?
Well, not particularly. I think man is always going to be wrestling with, how powerful should we be? What part of our budget should we spend on things military, which aren't productive in the general sense of the word? How much, does the technological success of our society depend on how much we spend for government-sponsored stuff? I don't know what to say about where we're going and how we're going to get there. And frankly, look, I have a great grandson. I would wish that he'd grow up in a world which wasn't spending so much money on things military.
Yeah. $1 trillion in the U.S. alone. And what about Canada? What's their budget?
Oh, we have a very small budget for things military. We don't have any nuclear weapons, and we're not threatening anybody.
That's true.
We have only a tenth the population of the U.S., and the military budget is much less than a tenth here of what it is there.
And you do have more land mass, and
yes,
it's ironic, just crossing that invisible barrier between the two countries, the violence that is all around people in the U.S. I don't know why, but when you cross over into Canada, seems to dissipate. And I've always wondered, but that's a whole philosophical conversation on its own. I just wanted to throw that out there because you are in fact in Canada, and we're talking to you from Canada right now. And I know people in the chat are worldwide, and I'm sure they have their own opinions on that.
Now, I'm a dual citizen.
You
I can
are.
complain about both countries,
That's right.
Canada and the United States.
You're one of those rare few that's got dual citizenship. That's right. That's right. And I can't forget
2
that.
passports.
Even better. Even better. Do you have to carry, this is my own question, do you have to carry both wherever you go to get stamps from both?
I don't. It depends where I'm going. I often have 2 because I'll use one to get out and to come back in. But and I'm 84 years old. I'm cut back on my traveling. I've got a few lectures left to give. I'll be speaking in Roswell, and I'll be at the MUFON conference in Irvine, California in July. And I've got, they can go to my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, and it'll list lectures and stuff, and books. And I would like to write another book, more philosophical one, if you will. But hey, it just depends on how things go. But as long as I'm healthy and can feed the family, then let's keep at it. It's fun.
Well said. And you know what? You said in one of the earlier interviews, and I'm talking about, 6, 7 years ago, that when you first started doing this and you found out there was a way that you can also make a living by writing books and traveling through the world and giving lectures, following your passion with the number one word, following curiosity. And that's the whole reason this show exists to begin with. This is why I picked up the phone and called you years ago and said, Mr. Friedman, I have tons of questions to ask you. I've been reading about you and watching you on TV so many years, and then this started off this large storm that we are in now. Now, back to reality here. Guy Merritt, no. Who is it? Frankie Zomboy says he is moving to Canada. He wants to know what's the warmest part.
Probably the Vancouver area.
West Coast.
Yes.
Gotcha.
But you don't need to be warm. We have artificial means of providing energy, so we survive here, even though it gets cold. Little cold air never hurt anybody. Dress for it, that's all.
Dress for it. There's hand warmers, there's feet warmers, and if you have a car, most people do, there are definitely heaters in there, and homes,
Yep.
I would think, that are in places where winters have snow. I can't imagine there's a home that is going back to about 200 years ago, where there was no central heating system or anything like that. Now, let me ask you my own little question here. So, since we know that you're going to retire at the end of this year, what are you planning for your retirement? Because I know a lot of people who still consider you an icon that you are going to always want to ask you and pick your brain and ask more questions and say, hey, this new footage was released and it's been verified by the DOD. Mr. Friedman, what's your take? What are you going to do?
Well, I'll probably, if I have the opportunity to study the matter at hand, I will probably render an opinion after spending the study. But I'm going to, look, as I said, I'm 84. I would like to write another book, 60 years of ufology, maybe. That's the title of my MUFON paper in July. And 60 years is a long time, and things have changed, and I'm delighted to see how much we've learned about the universe and about each other and all that in that period of time. So another book would be an important thing for me to do. I enjoy writing, and if I'm not interrupting my life by traveling hither, thither, and yon to give lectures, it makes it a lot easier to write, I think, in a reasonable period of time. So, look, what do people my age do? They try to have a little fun and enjoy life, but I'm not planning a round-the-world trip or anything like that. I live in Fredericton, New Brunswick. It's a great place to live. The University of New Brunswick is here. We're on the beautiful St. John River. We grow great potatoes in New Brunswick. We got great lobsters on the seacoast. We got lots of seacoast. So, I've lived here for more than 30 years. Moved here from California, and I have never regretted the move. Got family here. So life is good. What the heck? So I'm old. Okay. That's better than the alternative.
Hey, you know what? That's still young. Look at Paul Hellyer. He was on a couple weeks ago, 95 or even older than that. He's still going. He's still speaking.
Sharp guy. Yes, I've met him several times.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I saw both of you at the MUFON Symposium when it was held in Orange County, I believe it was also summer of 2015, if not 2016. That was in a time when I got to see both of you at the same time, at the same location, both of you speaking.
Well, hey, it just proves that getting old isn't an obstacle to being able to communicate something that's useful to people.
Now, let me ask you this, because I've recently heard about this, and this is because of my own personal reasons that I was out of radio for 20 months, that Kathleen Martin has come out, and maybe you can correct me and fill in the story here, because this question really is for her, but because you know her very well and you've written a book with her. Three. She's talked about her own abduction.
Yes.
Okay? Can you tell us a little about that? Because I have yet to reach out for this time since I've come back in August.
There is a book out that covers some of them, and there will, I think, be another one that covers more of them. Kathleen is a very bright lady, and not just because she's Betty Hill's niece, but she's done a lot of research, a lot of checking into cases, and didn't come out because it was better not to, so that people wouldn't look at things in the wrong way, that she was promoting herself or anything like that, because she isn't. She's looking for truth. And Marden, look for her books, and you'll find them well worth reading. Not just the ones that she and I have co-written.
Now, let me ask you another question, since we do have about 12 minutes left, and I want to leave a couple minutes, enough time for you to plug in your website, books, and of course to give my thank yous. We talked about especially this one documentary that showed the American Indians, I believe, that painted in cave walls what looked to be grays. And you said maybe they were seeing the same, maybe what other people who have been abducted are seeing the same little guys that they saw back then. Now, this is one species. What other species of ETs have you heard about that have come visited us?
Well, I've heard of the tall whites, for example, which is kind of in contrast with little ones, but quite strangely, I haven't heard about three-armed beings or four-legged beings or people with three eyes. It's amazing to me that all the beings that I've heard of have been, I'm tempted to say humanoid, something like our guys, if you will, or like us. Now, but I don't know whether to draw the conclusion that that's what's living around all the places or just in this peculiar part of the universe. I don't know. But look, we got so many years to play with. A few hundred years ago, we thought the world was created in 4004 BC. Well, that's not a long, 6,000 years is a long time to develop new life forms. But if you say, it's 4 billion here and 13 billion in the galaxy, there's plenty of room for there to have been other kinds of beings or to have one group take over. So I don't know. I wish we knew, we had an encyclopedia that listed the species in the neighborhood.
I know,
I think
right?
it would be fascinating, wouldn't it?
And it would be fantastic if we can say, call them up and say, hey, we need you for an interview. It's not going to happen. So,
No.
this is the best
No.
we can do is get the stories from people who have actually interacted with them, whether it be through
Yes.
abduction or contact or from whatever other reason. Maybe they were part of the recovery teams at Roswell or anything else that had
Who
happened.
knows?
Yeah, yeah. Now, another question's popped up. Frankie Zomboy, what is your opinion on the conspiracies on Antarctica?
Well, I'm curious more than anything. I haven't heard of, excuse me, detailed information. Um, and I've never been to Antarctica. I've done a lot of traveling. I've lectured in 20 countries in all 50 states and so forth. So I've been around, but never been to Antarctica. I don't think anybody's holding any lectures down there, as a matter of fact. So I think there is more to learn. It wouldn't surprise me if it turns out that there is evidence around that there have been past, I'll say, cities, civilizations, groups of people living together in Antarctica in the distant past. I don't know. It's a fascinating place to explore, but I'm not packing my suitcase for it. It doesn't
Neither am
sound like
I.
it'd be a lot of fun, So I don't know what's going on in Antarctica. And again, the question of history is so important here. Things are different when you think, oh, the place has only been around for a few thousand years, and you say, oh, it's a few billion years. Oh, that opens up the door, doesn't it, on a wide variety of species, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. So I'm curious. I don't know.
Now, this is two questions by Justin Thomas, and for fairness, I'm going to ask them, but I already assume I know the first answer. Okay, he asks, let me find both of them at the same time. Why, instead of how come, why does Stanton wear the red handkerchief in his coat pocket? Is he a member of secret society?
I don't always wear a red one, but I kind of like the way it goes with all the colors of the few suits that I have. No particular reason. It does not mean I'm a member of a red organization or anything like that. No.
No.
I mean, my grandparents were Russian, so maybe you can say they were Reds.
Hey, well, that's one way to spin it, right? Now, here's the other part, and even after this question, I would think anybody who would be involved in what Justin's about to ask or ask that I'm about to say would probably not be able to answer. He says, has Stanton ever worked on classified programs involving alien technology?
No.
That's what
So far as I know.
Exactly, right?
No. No.
Lisa Kastner, have you seen Thrive the movie that came out, 8 years ago at this point by Foster
No.
Gamble?
No. Probably worth seeing.
Yeah, it's actually available for free. It's a great movie, and I've had Foster on the show. Edgar Mitchell was on it. I'm actually surprised they didn't, call you for it. That was one thing that sort of shocked me because he had the funds available to create a movie and put it out for free so people can sort of wake up. The whole meaning of thrive was we don't have to just survive, we can thrive. And that's why there was Nassim Harriman talking about quantum physics and what the possibilities are of the future, alien technology, and of course Edgar Mitchell being the sixth man on the moon, adding to the fact that, hey, we are not alone. And when it comes from someone like that, is someone credible. And one thing and I know most people don't know this, is that after he returned from the moon, Edgar went back to Roswell, where he attended high school. And since he was a decorated hero, everybody told him the story.
Yeah, Edgar's quite a guy, and one of my heroes. That is, I think it takes an awful lot to develop all the skills that are needed to be successful in more than one career, especially when it's as difficult. Space travel isn't just fun. I mean, a lot of people may think it is. There's an awful lot of training, learning, being ready to take steps if certain things happen that probably won't, but you got to be prepared. We forget. We only think of what happens. We don't think of, we were ready for some other things to happen, and we had to learn to be prepared because who knows, those things might happen. So Edgar is a hero of mine. I have the greatest respect for those guys.
Me too. And
who went into space.
I'm so sad when he passed away on that Friday. I actually was able to interview him on that Wednesday, and it was set to be released the following week. And unfortunately, because he passed away, I sort of buried the interview, and I had never released it because out of respect for the family. He was such a great guy. Now, I'm going to ask Justin Thomas's two questions together since we are literally coming to the end of the time. Has Stanton kept anything to himself that he would like to go public? New info? Question mark.
I don't think so. I mean, I've always respected the rules of classification and security and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not casual about releasing stuff that's classified. I don't. I follow the rules. But no, I think the answer is no. I'm not holding back. How would I learn it in the first place?
True. And you've actually given a very remarkable presentation, multiple, about classification and the need for security. And you yourself have stated that it wouldn't be wise to release everything because of national security reasons. And that's absolutely right. Yes. Very well said. Okay, the other part of Justin's question. What is your take on the first picture of the black hole? Could this be disclosure of some sort?
I don't know. I'm very curious about that. I intend to do more follow-up on that because it's nice to learn something new about the universe and about the things that are in it. And I think we're just beginning. I looked at those pictures and is all I could say. I'm not satisfied that I have sensible answers to the questions about that.
Well said. There is another question, but because we are literally out of time, I'm going to tell everybody, hang tight. I will bring Mr. Friedman back on before he retires, so you will all have a chance to get another chance to interact with him, either here and other places, other forums, as a matter of fact, his website. So with that being said, Mr. Friedman, if you can give a statement that would encompass basically everything we talked about, which was all over the place today, what would you say to everybody?
I'd say be aware that we're part of a larger community, that there are alien beings out there. Some of them come here. They obviously have been around longer than we have. I think we need to try to interact with more aliens. I think we should become part of a galactic community, if you will. And I think that man should be a friendly creature. That is to say, we shouldn't be isolated. I think there's a galactic federation, if you will, something, call it whatever you want. But I think that we're just at the beginning of understanding that we're part of a much larger picture than we used to think we were. And that's exciting to me. So I'm still excited about learning more about the place in which we live and which others live that we don't know so well. I'm an optimist. We're going to learn a lot more.
And we are every single day. I mean, decades ago, they could only theorize about black holes, and now here we are with an image of one. And the fact that you have this optimism is a good thing, because there are others that I know that unfortunately don't share this optimism. To me, we have to carry on this optimism. We have to have the curiosity of wanting to know where they come from. What do the worlds look like? How do these craft operate? There's so many questions that are endless. With that being said, Mr. Friedman, I want to to thank you so much for coming on the show again, and I want to give you time to plug in your website and your books again.
Well, thank you very much. And the website is www.stanton, Stanton, Friedman, Friedman.com. And books are available. You can find them on the website. Put in my name in books. There's plenty of them. And they cover a variety of purposes, if you will. I think it's exciting to recognize that there is an enormous amount of evidence that indicates man isn't alone, that aliens have been coming here. Maybe they're being punished, spend 2 weeks near Earth. That's punishment to last a lifetime. Who knows? But, what is clear is that the aliens who are coming here haven't destroyed the place. And that says a great deal for the aliens. And I think we can learn from that example. Let's build, not destroy. Let's be friendly, not nasty. I want the place to be better for my great-grandson.
Well said. And you know what? We all hope for peace and prosperity for all the future generations. Now, let me give some shout outs. First of all, for the guest who's in the chat, Elena Servideo Schwinn, I want to thank you so much for actually listening. She was just on the 18th of this month. One short announcement, folks. Between May 5th and May 12th, I will be in Hawaii, so there will not be this show, but I will be back on Monday the 13th. Also, I want to thank Joe Montaldo, station owner of UPRN, also JC of Deprogrammed Radio Network in the United Kingdom. And of course, we have to thank iHeartRadio and all the other forums. I definitely want to give a shout out to all of YouTube Nation for all you fine people in the chat who have definitely really engaged in our guest tonight. I really thank you for that because it just shows to me, giving me feedback that you guys really, really wanted to hear from Mr. Friedman again. And this is why I'm very glad we booked him again. Also, I want to thank Pam Vrettenberg, my social media manager. Please check out our website, unitedtruthseekers.com. And Joshua Cheris, my assistant producer and VP of operations. With that being said, folks, the only thing else is if you need anything, if you want to learn anything about the show, all you have to do is remember the name of it, Dr. J Radio Live. That is DRJ Radio Live. Everything from the website, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, Minds, Facebook, you name it, it's all the same. One little thing I have to say, remember folks, disclosure is in your hands. Please just don't be passive researchers. Become proactive. Take this interview, share it with other people who may be on the fence, or if you have a book of Mr. Friedman's, pass it on to someone so they can learn something. There's always something more that can be done, and it's going to require everybody to help get us into this next age of future. With that being said, I want to thank my guest, Mr. Stan the Man Friedman, again for such an awesome time. And now officially, I have to sign off.